Okay, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidil Anbiya wal Mursaleen. Allahumma alimna ma yanfa'una wa anfa'na bima tu'allimuna wa zidna bi fadlika ilman wa ta'liman innaka ala kulli shay'in qadir. So, continuing with our book, we are looking now at worship, and worship is something we are obliged to do, but worship is something that is a means. So the believer looks at every single act of worship, every single avoidance, um, avoiding the haram or doing the wajib is a means to open their heart to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, increase their iman, increase their appreciation of who Allah is, what Allah is, and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is directly involved in their life. So it's very, very important to understand rituals are not just something we do. Ritual is a way of opening a door, right? So it's very important. So it says, the ritual obligations, the fard, meaning that without which, if you didn't do this, the wudu would simply not count. It says, is the niyyah, that when you're washing your face, you intend to do what you're doing. To wash the face and he says the limits of the face are the hairline, the place where the hairline normally begins, down to the chin, and the extremities of the sides of the chin, and the whole of the beard, either outward of the beard. And the width of the face is from one ear. One ear is the place where the one ear touches the face to the other ear. So the ears are not part of the face, right? And so this is the definition of the face. And this is important because when a woman is wearing hijab, you have to cover everything apart from your face and hands, right? So that means your hijab has to cover up to your chin bone, right? So you put your hand on your chin, the hijab has to be on your chin bone. So if it's coming down such that skin from beneath your chin bone can be seen, so you put your finger on your chin bone and you can feel under your neck and that's exposed, that means your awrah is exposed, right? And you can't expose that to ajanib, to non-mahram men, men you're not, not immediate family, or you cannot expose that in prayer because that's your awrah. And then you have to wash both arms and elbow up to and including the elbows. And if, for example, you have thick makeup on or nail varnish that stops the water reaching the area, then this is going to be, obviously, we shouldn't wear that outside, but let's say at home or at a function or something like that with women, you had these things on, and this will then, you need to remove these things before you make wudu. Number 4, wiping a part of the head, the scalp, or the hair. So the Shafi school, the bare minimum is to just wash one tiny part of the scalp, meaning get water there. So even if it goes through one's hijab, through one's hat, the tiniest part of the head can go through. Or hair that's within the limits of the head. So when you say limits of the head, you mean above your ears and that kind of line. So if it's on where the nape of the neck is, or a woman, for example, wiping her hair, one tiny bit of her hair that comes down on her shoulders, that wouldn't count. And performing the action order. So you have to do an order. It has to be face, arms, head, feet. If you forget and break the order, or you, right, intentionally or unintentionally, you have to go back to the thing that you did before breaking the order, right? So back to that thing. So for example, you did your face, you did your arms, and then you did your feet, and then you did your hair. So then the feet doesn't count. You're gonna go back to the hair, which you did, and then you have to do your feet, right? So whatever is out of order, whatever is not in order, is ignored, right? And this is part and parcel of the concept of bid'ah, right? Talking about saying bid'ah, that's a bid'ah in ibadah, meaning if you do something that Allah has not asked you to do, it doesn't count. Right. So here the same thing. You do something that's not a bid'ah in the sense like you're doing something wrong, but it's not part of what Allah asked you to do, so therefore it's not recognized. It's just not even there. Right? You have to go back and make sure everything's done in order. If one is in a state of janaba because of sexual intercourse or emission of semen or female sexual fluid during sleep or for some other reason, it is necessary to wash the whole body with the intention of janaba. So also it's very simple. You wash the whole body with the intention of removing janaba, removing ritual impurity, or I'm having a shower to pray, or I'm having a shower for something that you need a shower for, right? So that's considered. Let's say, for example, a woman, she had a period, and then before she after she can't be intimate with her husband unless she has a shower. So now she has a shower in order to make it halal for her to be intimate with her husband. And then she wants to pray. Does that count? Yeah. Because you did something. You washed yourself with the intention of breaking this barrier between you and what you and this thing. So that you've now changed yourself ritually, as opposed to someone just having a shower. Right? Someone has a shower and then they realize, oh my God, I actually had to have a shower. That doesn't count. Or they made ghusl for sunnah. For example, it was Jummah and they made a sunnah ghusl on Jummah. And while they're at the Jummah, they're about to say Allahu Akbar, they realize, SubhanAllah, I had to actually I was in Janaba, I had to make ghusl. But your intention was to just do an extra ghusl. So that extra sunnah ghusl that you did on Friday, that doesn't count. You got to do a ghusl that means I'm making myself pure, but you didn't do that. You just kind of did it as an extra, so that doesn't count, right? Or a ghusl on Eid, right? That doesn't count. Or just a shower, right? This person has a shower every morning, and then they're like, did you intend ghusl? Like, no, I just had a shower. So you have to intend ghusl. It has to be a ritual. It has to be important, right? You're doing a ritual. That's what you're doing, as opposed to just having a shower. So if you intend, I'm making ghusl to pray, I'm making ghusl, I'm making it permissible for me to do something that I couldn't normally do. For example, a man or a woman who's in janaba, or a woman who's just finished a period, or she's on a period, she can't be in a mosque. Now she wants to go in a mosque. So she said, well, in order to go to a mosque, I have to make ghusl. So now she's saying, I'm making, in her head, she's washing her whole body in order to make it permissible to go in a mosque. Well, he's doing that, right? That's the same kind of thing. So emission of anything from the two passages, front or back, nullifies wudu. Liquid, gas, solid, normal, and abnormal. It's all the same. Even if something was inserted medically, for example, and then came out, that would break your wudu. Wudu is also lost upon losing consciousness in an absolute sense. So if you lose consciousness through drugs in a halal or haram way, right? Taking general anesthetic, or somebody is drunk, totally drunk, may Allah protect us, or under effect of drugs, may Allah protect us, or they got knocked out in a fight, knocked out in a car accident, may Allah protect us, or they fainted, the wudu is broken. The exception to that is a specific thing, which is sleep specifically when firmly seated, right? So they fell asleep while driving, they fell asleep in the airplane seat, they fell asleep on a chair, they fell asleep while sitting cross-legged, such that their behind is firmly on the ground, such that it would be quite difficult for them to pass wind, right? Not impossible, but quite difficult, right? Because of the way that they're sitting. So even if they're asleep for 10 hours, right, they still have wudu, because you're firmly seated, as opposed to someone sleeping on their side, right? Sleeping on their back, for example, that breaks the wudu. Touching the private parts in general, any human private parts, front or back, right, of any human, whether oneself in changing, for example, or somebody else while cleaning a baby, right? Sexually or not sexually, whether adult or child, with the palm of the hand, right? The inner side of the hand specifically, or the inside of the fingers. So if you look at the palm of the hand or the inside of the fingers that follows the palm, right? So if you look at your finger, right, as a kind of like having, I don't know, one, two, three, one has for like five sides, like the top of it, and that's like the top. And then you have a kind of an inner side, which is equivalent to the palm. And then you have two sides either way, and then you have the back. So the back of the hand, touching with that doesn't break wudu. The side in either side, no. The point, no. The side that follows the palm, right? So you put your hands together, push them together, right? That's what we're talking about, that inner side, right? So touching, right, with no barrier. So imagine, for example, you're putting cream on a baby's private parts, but there was a barrier of cream between your finger and the baby, right? Or you had gloves on, right? And then it's just worth noting whether in the Shafi school or outside the Shafi school, musafaha, shaking hands with the opposite sex is haram, right? You cannot have skin-to-skin contact between two people who are not two men and women who are not married or not brother and sister or, you know, um, son and daughter and her father or something like that. You can't do that, right? So that's haram, right? You can only touch a member of the opposite sex for some genuine necessity, right? Medical necessity or something like that, right? And so shaking hands in a social setting or a business setting is haram. You can't do that by agreement of the four schools. You can't do that. So whether it breaks wudu or not there's a different discussion, right? One thing is it halal to touch a woman. The other one is does it break your wudu or not? So here it says touching private parts anyway, even if it's one's own dead child. So the child's alone, the child's dead, and the child, it's a child, not an adult. It's your own. It doesn't make any difference. Touching the skin of an adult male by an unrelated adult female. So unrelated meaning not father, not grandfather, not uncle, not nephew, not son, not grandson, etc. Not son-in-law, right? So you're mahram to your mother-in-law, right? Like you could never marry your mother-in-law or your daughter-in-law. You could never marry that person, right? So that person's a mahram to you, right? So anybody who's not a mahram to you, for example, whom? Like your wife or your husband, that's not a mahram, right? Your wife is not a mahram. Mahram means somebody is haram to marry, right? So your husband is not a mahram. So they're considered unrelated, right? Or vice versa. Without any intervening barrier, nullifies wudu, right? However, touching the nails, hair, or teeth does not nullify the wudu. And this is the position of the Shafi'is. And again, when we say the Shafi'is, meaning 10,000 scholars agreed with this. And you hear here and there, like Jarir al-Tabari, not somewhat a Shafi, he disagreed. He says touching does not break the wudu, right? And somebody else with the name Tabari, when you say Tabari, means somebody from Tabaristan in Iran or uh, Lake Tiberias in Palestine, right? Al-Muhib al-Tabari. So there's Ibn Jarir al-Tabari, who was in the early 4th century, the great Mufassir and early Shafi'i, right? He said, for 15 years, I gave fatwa on the Shafi school, and then he had his own opinions, but he's still a Shafi in the sense, generally speaking, in the sense that he works within the Shafi framework in general. Al-Muhib al-Tabari, much later, great Mufti of Mecca in the 7th, 8th century, I believe, 7th century. He's also of the opinion that doesn't, like, just merely touching a woman does not break your wudu, right? But otherwise, the vote of the Shafis is yes, it does, right? And so, are you obliged to follow that? No. Are you obliged to believe that? No. Are you obliged to respect that? Yes. So what's fine is for you to do something else. To say, well, there's other ulama that say other things. Oh, that's fine, not a problem. But you have to, what you are obliged to do is say, this is the position of thousands and thousands of scholars, right? Imam an-Nawawi quotes like 20, 30 of the Salaf, Sahaba and Tabi'in who said that, right? Touching the opposite sex breaks your wudu. So what you can't do is look down on it with disdain. That obviously these people don't know. There's this hadith, there's this verse, they don't know anything. That's very, very bad, right? You don't have to agree, nor do you have to follow, but you do have to revere. Okay? Just like Imam Abu Hanifa, he says Asr comes in at a later time. That's because he doesn't know this. That's because he's a fool. That's because, oh, that's a problem. You don't have to follow his opinion. You do have to revere it because this is real scholarship, right? You don't have to revere an individual. Sheikh Farid Dingle says something. Who cares what Sheikh Farid Dingle says? He's not a real scholar. He's not, right? But if real scholarship, thousands of top-notch scholars say something, whether you agree or disagree, or whether you want to follow that or not, that's one totally issue. You have to revere it, right? This is a very important thing. And you have to see it as a eligible and viable explanation of what Allah wants you to do, whether you want to do it or not. Right? It's very important. Reverence is very important. And so this is what we lose when people say, no, it's against the Quran and Sunnah. This person doesn't know, right? They'll say the following. Well, Imam Abu Hanifa said this, and Imam Shafi said this. وَالرَّاجِحُ كَذا. And the correct position is this. What does that mean? The rajih is كذا. 10,000 people said this and 10,000 people said that. Both are eligible answers. You can follow whichever you want, that's fine. But you have to revere and respect all of them. You can't come along and say, yeah, but he just doesn't know. Like, he just doesn't know. That's just an error. It's not possible that 10,000 people have misunderstood something or not thought of what you've heard of or not read what you've read. Most likely 10,000 people who worked on a madhab, they've read what you've read and more, and they've thought about what you thought about and more. And so you say, this is a position and this is a position, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. But ar-rajih kada, the correct position is this. What does that even mean? That's not even a way of speaking, right? That doesn't make any sense. It's indicative of a pride, indicative of an emotional state that's off and an academic state that's off. Rather, we say, the Shafi'i say this, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. If you want to follow it, follow it. Don't want to follow it, don't follow it. But you have to revere it as a viable explanation of the Quran and Sunnah, right? Somebody sees, for example, a Maliki praying with his hands by his sides. They're like, what's that? That's not the Sunnah. Hang on a minute. Who are you saying it's not the Sunnah? 10,000 scholars of these Malikis filled Muslim Spain with knowledge, North Africa with knowledge, great scholars of one of the greatest narrators of Sahih Bukhari from the students of Imam Bukhari is Maliki. Great scholars of Imam Malik. If they say that it's Sunnah for you to pray with your hands by your side, you have to revere that and respect that as a viable explanation of the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. When the Prophet ﷺ said, Sallu kama ra'aytumuni usalli, you have to say, these people have done their ijtihad and they've seen the hadiths that I've seen and they've seen the verse of the Quran that I've seen and they've thought about everything I've seen plus 1,000 and they've disagreed with what I think or what seems obvious to me or what I'm used to and they have a totally different explanation. They're like, okay. And it's pride and arrogance and ignorance to say, that's just wrong, right? That's just wrong. Right? It's either ignorance or arrogance, right? Whereas you have to revere whenever we see something that one of the former dhahib has held, that means that's could well be exactly what the Prophet meant, right? And if you say no, it isn't, you have a problem. You don't have to apply it, and you don't have to agree with it, but you do have to revere it as a viable explanation of what Allah wants you to do. Right? And so when we say an adult male, it means a boy who's reached puberty or close enough, or a girl has reached puberty or close enough. You look at this girl or you look at this boy and you say, yeah, I mean, they're close enough to puberty for somebody of sound nature, right? Somebody who's not a pedophile, male protectors, to find them attractive, right? Somebody who's of normal nature, who's would look at that person and be like, yeah, she's of the age that a normal man might find that person somewhat attractive, or a normal man, woman could see that like might feel a bit awkward, right? Let's say you're hugging this boy and you still really feel comfortable. What does that mean? What do you mean you don't feel comfortable? You're attracted to him? Not really, but it's just he's not a kid anymore. I mean, I guess he hasn't reached puberty, but it's kind of a bit awkward, right? And so we should be aware of these things and treat these things real. Many people, unfortunately, they don't. They kind of like play things down as if it's not there, right? They'll be like, well, I mean, what am I supposed to say? Like, tell some guy that I find your daughter attractive, so that's why I don't want to sit next to her. So it doesn't mean that, right? It doesn't mean that you're interested in that kind of sense. But it's like it's not a girl, right? This is not a little girl. There's baby and there's woman. And this girl is closer to woman than baby. Okay, so then she should be with the women and she shouldn't be around the men. Same thing, the boy. This boy, is he man or is he baby? Well, he's closer to man than baby. Okay, put him over there, right? So grade 2, grade 3, depending on how things are, right? Um, and so we should be aware of these things. Okay, so the validity. So we have 4 things then in the Shafi school that break wudu. Number 1, anything come out the prior parts. Number 2, losing consciousness. the sole exception is sleep when firmly seated. Number 3, touching private parts. Number 4, touching a member of the opposite sex. So bleeding in the Shafi'i school does not break wudu. Eating camel meat does not break wudu, right? Laughing in prayer does not break wudu in the Shafi'i school. I don't know what else. Touching najasa, right? Touching najasa is an interesting scenario, right? I was once talking to somebody who has a PhD in tafsir, right? So they did the undergrad in Islamic studies, masters in Islamic studies, PhD in Islamic studies, right? You would imagine that they know quite a lot about Islam. So this gentleman, he said, touching najasa breaks your wudu, right? And so I asked him a question, which madhab do you follow? And so obviously he said, I don't follow madhab because I'm too educated to follow madhab, right? Classic answer of a modern Muslim scholar is, I'm too educated to follow madhab, mashallah. So then I say, which of the four madhahib say that if you touch najasa, it breaks wudu? He's like, oh, because he's not Shafi'i, so he doesn't know Shafi'i fiqh. And he's not Maliki, so he doesn't know Maliki fiqh. He's not Hanafi, because why would you be Hanafi? Right? That's strange, right? And he's not Hanbali, because he's too educated for that. And then I ask him, I say, which madhab says that touching najasa breaks your wudu? And he comes back to me half an hour later, whoops, I was wrong. Nobody says that touching najasa breaks your wudu, and I just misguided the people around me. Right? It's something I saw with my own eyes. So this is indicative of where we are. Okay, indicative of where we are in the world today, where somebody is a mufti, somebody is sheikh, somebody is this. You ask them, which madhab do you follow? Say, I'm just following Quran and Sunnah. And they end up having something that's what the phrase in Arabic is lakhbata, right? It's just neither A nor B. Like you actually know nothing. Jack of all trades, master of none, right? And if only he was a jack of all trades, but this is jahl, right? So there's nothing wrong with specializing in the madhab and disagreeing with it here and there based on the principles of that madhab. That's fine. But you need to know something before you can do something. If you want to create your own martial art after you study karate and after you study judo and after, that's fine. But if you study nothing and you start talking about better stance than what? You don't even know what the stances are in different martial arts. Right? A different way of punching. You don't even know what the different ways of punching. You haven't done boxing. You haven't done karate. You haven't done kung fu. You haven't what are you even talking about? What are you even talking about? And so a tamadhub is following a madhab is not there to cage people. Following a madhab is to make sure you have a system and you actually have knowledge. And that's why you see, since from the 4th century to the 19th century, every single Muslim scholar, right, and Bakrati Abihim, every single person, Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi, everybody, you don't exist if you're not one of those schools. Suddenly in the 21st century, you can be something else because that's mutakhallif, that's called taqleed, right? Why would I do that? When that's not the reality, right? The reality is tamadhub is the way of all of the ulama. It doesn't mean that you do taqleed. Tamadhub and taqleed are not the same thing, but it means you have a system, right? And this is what happens. I don't follow any of these madhahib. You end up doing something that's crazy, right? Heard of people, for example, joining prayers their whole life, right? Like, what do you do? They do crazy things because I'm too educated to follow in the form of madhahib. You end up doing nothing, right? If you want to be educated, then study one properly, study a second one properly, study a third properly, study a fourth properly. Then you can actually compare. But if you don't know what they are to begin with, how could you even compare them? And this is the reality of what you see. Most shuyukh online, they say this, and I've seen it. I've seen it with my own eyes. Another scenario, a very, very well-established, famous website, right? That doesn't identify with particular madhab. And so they say, they'll quote the different madhahib and they'll show what is the most likely given the Quran and Sunnah. But they're not Shafi'is and they're not Hanbalis and they're not Maliki and they're not this. And they make mistakes. They'll quote the Shafi school. They say, listen, these are the 4 positions, but this is the strongest. Like, but you quoted the Shafi school incorrectly. That's not even the Shafi school. So how could you compare 4 things if you don't know what they are? How could you compare 4 things if you don't know why they're saying what they're saying? You don't know why I'm saying what I'm saying because you haven't studied with me. So therefore, you can't even compare them. Comparing them based on which methodology, right? And so this is very important. Someone who doesn't know one, then knows nothing. If you don't know one thing, then you know nothing. Okay, fine. So these are the four. So validity of the prayer is dependent on the following: awareness that the time has come in with certainty, or غلبة الظن, conviction. So you either know 100% or you are 80-90% sure that it is now Maghrib. خلاص. It must be Maghrib. How do you know it's Maghrib? Did you see the sunset? Well, look at the sky. How do you know it's Maghrib? Well, I mean, I've been here reading this book for this much time. I prayed Asr and I've read this many pages. It's not possible for reading these many pages and in less than this much time. So it must be Maghrib, even if I don't go out and look, right? Even if I don't go out and look. Knowing where the Qibla is, right? You got to face the direction of the Qibla. And in the Shafi school, we mean the Qibla itself, as opposed to 5 degrees to the right and 5 degrees to the left, right? So like it's this direction, not a little bit here, a little bit there. Covering one's awra, right? And so you have to cover your awra, meaning a man has to cover everything apart from his everything apart from above his belly button and beneath his knees. So you cover everything between your knees and your belly button. It has to be covered. And a woman has to cover every single thing, including her feet, with the exception of the face, which stops at the chin, okay, and the hands, right? So you have to be careful about that. With clean clothes, meaning if you have najasa on your clothes, you can't pray like that. And the filth, you have urine on your clothes, you have feces on your clothes, you have alcohol on your clothes, you have blood on your clothes, you can't pray like that by default. And the remove impurity from your clothes, your body, meaning your outer body, right? So if somebody, for example, may Allah protect us, they swallowed najasa, okay? Do they have to throw it up before they pray? No. They just have to rinse their mouth, right? Gargle with water and that's it. And the place of prayer, meaning the thing you're actually standing on. So where you're actually standing, not the area between you. So there's blood on your prayer mat, yeah, but are you standing on the blood? No. Are your knees on the blood? No. Are your hands on the blood? No. Is your face on the blood? Are your clothes touching the blood? Are your clothes touching the vomit? No. Right? So as long as it's pure, it's pure. It is also necessary to stand for the prayer if one is able. So if you're not able to stand, you're excused. But otherwise, if you are, you have to. And this includes praying on a plane. Playing on a plane, on a plane, one has to stand up and face the Qibla. Right? I've been on many planes. I've never not been able to pray. Now, one exception could be, for example, let's say there's turbulence throughout the whole prayer time, right? Which is pretty extreme, given that you're a traveler, so the prayer time does not. But imagine, for example, you are flying towards the east, okay? And Fajr comes in. If you're flying towards the east, you're flying towards the sun. So therefore, Fajr is going to be shorter than normal. So imagine you're praying Fajr, got up to pray, and there's turbulence. It was really bad turbulence. Everyone says, absolutely, under no conditions, you can't get up. You cannot get up, go to the bathroom. You just have to sit down. Even if you need to go to the bathroom, you got to sit down. It's too dangerous, right? Cabin crew, sit down. There's no tea, there's no drinks, there's no food. Everybody has to sit down. Really bad turbulence. And so now you are sitting down for the whole time and you cannot get up. And every time you ask, they say no. Every time you ask, they say no. It's very, very dangerous. Everyone has to sit down. Nobody's allowed to go to the bathroom. In a life and death situation like that, yes, you can pray sitting down. But otherwise, there's no life and death situation and you're able to stand, you stand up and you pray. Right? It's something that's doable. Right? So you do have to do that. You cannot just sit down and pray and sitting down. Okay. And as far as I know, there is no position within the form of the madhahib that allows that, right? So what we see, unfortunately, of many people just sitting down praying. I don't know where that comes from. So just because a lot of people do things doesn't make it real, right? And we live in a time where there's a lot of jahl, right? And so that's what's happening. You say, is that the Shafi school? That is not the Shafi school. Go and ask a Hanafi. In the Hanafi school, can I sit down on an airplane and pray? The answer is no. In the Maliki school, no. In the Hanbali school, no. Right? And then you say, well, oh, but why do so many people do it? Beats me, right? Okay, so Salah. Obligations of the prayer are there. So we have the following are the bare minimum prayer. If you don't do these things, you simply have not prayed. If you have done this, you have prayed. Niyyah, meaning you're going to stand up and you are going to say Allahu Akbar and you're going to intend to pray this specific prayer, be it Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, Isha, whatever it is. Any specific prayer, you're going to intend, I'm doing this prayer and I'm doing it now, right? So right now, for example, it's Maghrib time. I haven't prayed Maghrib. I have an intention to pray Maghrib. So if I stand up now and say Allahu Akbar with the intention that I'm going to pray in 18 minutes when I finish this class, that's not considered praying. It's like I'm praying now. Allahu Akbar, I'm praying right now. If I'm going to demonstrate to some people how to pray and I say, well, you stand up and you say Allahu Akbar, I'm not praying, am I? So the niyyah is I'm praying now. Allahu Akbar, right? I'm standing, facing the Qibla. I know what I'm doing and I'm praying. That's your niyyah. Entering the prayer by saying Allahu Akbar, not Allahu Akbar or Allahu Akbar, right? Or Allahu Akbar or Allahu Akbar, right? You have to say it properly. It's a ritual, right? It's a ritual. It has to be said properly. Allahu Akbar, right? You pronounce the alif, Allahu Akbar, right? It has to be pronounced properly. And so again, here's another practical example about not knowing, not being specialized. Okay, so I'm specialized in the Shafi school. In principle, I'm supposed to know what's happening in the Shafi school, but I've read about other schools, of course. So I'm familiar in books of hadith, hadith commentary, and other places that in the Hanafi school, you can start the prayer with any word, right? That's what I'm familiar with. Okay, so that's what I've seen, right? That the word takbir could be understood in two ways. Takbir can mean say Allahu Akbar, right? And takbir can also mean to make big, right? Mukabbir sawt, right? Makes the voice big, is a microphone. So the Hanafis, this is what I read as a non-specialist, right? Reading in books of tafsir, hadith, etc., that the normal person who will not follow a madhab will read. And he will say, the Hanafis say that takbir means exalt. So if you said Subhanallah, it's fine. You can do that. The prayer will count. If you said Subhanallah, that you can the count, you're not doing the sunnah, of course, but it would count. Right? Allahu Akbar, Allahul Jalil, Subhanallah, Allahu Latif, Allahu I don't know, any kind of praise, right, would be enough. You don't have to say Allahu Akbar. Okay, so this is something that happened with me. I'm in Jum'ah, and the Imam who leads Jum'ah says Allahu Akbar. So in my mind, I say, I've studied Shafi fiqh, and I know specifically you cannot say that. You can't say Allahu Akbar because you added an alif to the word, right? So I say, Alhamdulillah, this prayer is not valid in the Shafi school, but inshallah, it's valid in the Hanafi school. And as a non-specialist, I'm just going to roll with that. Okay? That's what I've read in books, right? How does somebody who doesn't study madhab study the deen? They will look at books that just compare things and they do it in a non-specialized way. They read, for example, a commentary on Sahih Bukhari or Abu Dawood, and in the commentary, tangentially, they'll throw in some fiqh here and there, right? And so that's how they learn fiqh, through just kind of like passively, as opposed to doing it in a specialized way. So that's what I've seen as a non-specialist, right? And so I'm assuming the prayer is fine. So I leave, just out of precaution, repeat the prayer, right? I don't tell anybody. But now 200, 300 people have prayed this Jummah, right? And I'm saying to myself, Alhamdulillah, Hanafi's got you covered. Then I check with specialists, Hanafis, right? And they say, no, 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 we don't mean that. When we say you could say something else, I mean you could say something else, like Subhanallah. But if you're going to say Allahu Akbar, you have to say Allahu Akbar correctly. And in fact, these specialists tell me that in the Hanafi school, If you said Allahu Akbar in the beginning of the prayer or in the middle of the prayer will be broken. Why? Because Akbar is the name of Shaitan. So you're saying Allah is Shaitan. It's a huge problem, right? So now, subhanallah, this prayer wasn't valid according to the Shafi'is, Hanbalis, Malikis, or Hanafis. Whoops. So now imagine if I never did that. Imagine if there was no Hanafis to go to. How would I know that? Imagine if there was no Shafis to go to. How would I know that? How would I know the details? Imagine if there was no Malikis, no Hanbalis, because everyone is just deen. Then what am I going to know? It's like people saying, I want to eat like a real pizza from, like, I want to eat a real pizza, like proper Italian pizza. But there's no such thing as Italian pizza anymore. It's just food. There's no specialists. So if there's no Shafi'is and no Shafi'ism, and no Hanafis and no Hanafiism, and no Malikis and no Hanbalis, what is there? Nothing. There's no deen. And so in reality, when somebody comes along and says, I just follow Quran and Sunnah, that methodology, do you know what's going to lead us? Into no deen. You don't have to be biased. You don't have to even follow the answer of the school. But you do have to be specialized, because if I don't know what the Shafis are saying and they don't know what the Malikis are saying, then nobody knows what anybody is saying. And we end up with a deen that is not the deen. I've seen another example. I was once in another class where one of the greatest hadith scholars ever, Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, super legit scholar, but he's Shafi'i. He's quoting the Malikis. He said the Shafi'is say this and the Malikis, sorry, Hanafis. He said the Shafi'is say this, but the Hanafis say this. And there's a Hanafi present in that class. And he's like, Sheikh, what the author is saying is not correct. That's not the Hanafi. That's not the Hanafi school. So if Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani can make a mistake, what about anybody else? So key thing to remember, we shouldn't be biased. It's not useful. We shouldn't be narrow-minded. It's not useful. But you have to be specialized. And if there's no Shafi'is left, and no Malikis left, and no Hanafis left, and no Hanbalis left, there is no deen, period. Right? Very important thing to know. Right? Okay, so entering the prayer by saying Allahu Akbar. Reading the Fatiha from beginning of Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim to the end, Wala Dallin. So Ameen is not part of the Fatiha. But Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Wala Dallin is all part of the Fatiha. Right? With the 14 points of stress with the shaddas. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. There's a shadda. You got to pronounce it. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Okay, so the shadda has to be there. You can't add an alif. You can't subtract an alif. Right? And not pronouncing the instead of la. Right? Classic, many Arabs, most Arabs in reality, they'll say wala dhalin, right? Wala dhalin. Right? You find maybe Indo-Pak, wala zwalin. Is that acceptable? Is that how Sayyidina Jibreel taught us the Fatiha? No. Okay, so if I unintentionally or accidentally pronounced it in the wrong way, does that count? The answer is no. You have not done the Fatiha. Oh, that's difficult. Yeah, it is. That means I have to learn how to pronounce the Dad. Yes, you do. Oh man, right? Okay, well, what about me? I'm English. I don't know how to pronounce the Ha. I don't know how to pronounce the Kha. My R's are totally different, right? A British R is totally different to Arabic R. I have to learn a million letters. Yeah, we all have to learn. Okay, what if I can't do it? What if I honestly can't do it? I try my best and I can't do it. Okay, in which case you're excused. In which case you're excused. You tried your best. Don't worry about it. But try your best and see what happens. You probably learn how to do the Ha. You probably learn how to do the Kha. You probably learn how to do the Qaf. You probably learn how to do the Dad. You can learn all these things. Like where there's a will, there's a way, usually. And for some people, they honestly can't do it. So I remember I prayed once behind the Mufti of Tarim. Super Sheikh, right, from Tarim. And he knows this book better than me 1,000 times, right? Sheikh al-Shtash, right, of Tarim in Hadramaut in Yemen. And he says, Ihdina sirat al-mustaqim. I was like, Subhanallah. He's saying mustaqim? What's that? because he honestly cannot pronounce the qaf. He honestly cannot pronounce it, right? But at least he's tried, and etc. Right? So if you honestly can't do it, fine. But most people, you learn, you can pronounce it. There's no dha in the Fatiha. There's no dha in the Fatiha, right? So classic many Arabs, arض, arض, right? Bi'tu ardi. It's not ardi, ardi, dad, right? Dalal, not dhalal. It's two different words, right? Dhalal, right? Dhalin means one thing, dhalin means something else, right? Dhaya, dhaya, not the same thing. Okay, and then bowing, you have to do ruku', and it is necessary to lean forward such that one could rest the hands on the knees. You do not have to put your hands on your knees, but you have to lean far forward enough that the palm of your hand could touch your knee. Right? That's that thing. And you have to do tuma'nina. You have to pause there. So the limbs rest. You go in there for a split second and you pause. And then you straighten up and then you pause. And then you go into sujud, which means that your skin of your head is on the floor. Your forehead, sorry, the skin of your forehead is on the floor. The hands are on the floor. Part of each hand is on the floor. Your knees are on the floor. And your bent back toes are on the floor, right? Those 7 limbs have to be on the floor for a second. You're there and you stop and then you come out. So your skin of your forehead, specifically the skin. So if a woman's wearing niqab, right? She has to either lift it up or make sure that there's a gap such that some of the skin of her forehead can touch the ground. Hands on the floor, whether the skin is on the floor, not something else. Knees on the floor, then toes, bent back toes, so the toes are bent. At least one toe has to be bent back so that it's facing the direction of the Qibla. And then you sit between it, etc. Right? So that's the prayer. Fatiha, ruku', go to bowing, straighten up again, go to sujood, straighten up again, go to sujood. Right? That's called a rak'ah. Do you have to say the Allahu Akbar in between? That's sunnah. Do you have to say Subhan Rabbil A'la, Subhan Rabbil Azim? That's sunnah. Sami Allahu liman hamidah, that's sunnah. Right? But the bare minimum is to do those things. One must fulfill the above in each rak'ah and each unit of prayer. The first tashahhud and the sitting during this part is sunnah. So doing the first tashahhud to sit down and do the tahiyyatu lillah, etc. is sunnah. The second is fard, and just like the Fatiha, it has to be done correctly. So at-tahiyyatu lillah, no. At-tahiyyatu lillah, no. At-tahiyyatu lillah, at-tahiyyatu lillah. So you're gonna have to sit down and learn it. You don't have to memorize it because you could read it from a piece of paper, but you do have to pronounce it properly, and that's hard. You have to put in the effort to do it. Alhamdulillah, there is difference of agreement among the madhahib. Is it wajib or not to do the tashahhud? But right, we have to be careful. So we have to the effort has to be done. Sit down and actually memorize these things. The prayer on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we have to in the fard. So right. So the tashahhud is wajib. You have to do the tashahhud. So you say Allah at-tahiyyatu lillah was-salawatu wat-tayyibat. Assalamu alayka ayyuhan nabiyyu wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alayna wa ala. Notice wa ala. You said wa ala. It's not wa ala. It's wa ala. There's an alif. Wa ala ibadillah his salihin. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Abduhu Rasulullah is extra, but Rasulullah. And then Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, or Allahumma salli ala Nabi, or Allahumma salli ala Rasul. Oh Allah, send blessings on Muhammad, or Allah send blessings on the Prophet, and Nabi with an L, or Ar-Rasul. Right? And then Assalamu alaikum. That's the bare minimum. One salam is enough. Assalamu alaikum. That's the bare minimum. The minimum tashahhud is at-tahiyyatu lillah. Salamun or salam. You can just say salam even without the one. Salam alaikum. Right? You don't have to say as-salam. Salam alaikum. Ayyuhan nabiyyu So it's not Assalamu alayka. It's Assalamu alayka, not Assalamu alaykum. There's a typo here. Assalamu alayka ayyuhan nabiyyu wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Salam alayna. Notice the little squiggly thing here? It's alayna, not alayna. Alayna. Wa ala ibadillah الصالحين أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأن محمدا عبده ورسوله. So عبده, that's extra. And then Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, or Allahumma salli ala Nabi, or Allahumma salli ala Rasul. It is also required to do so with utter sincerity and to make one's sole action for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To concentrate is also required. Hudur is to be aware of what one is saying and doing. Khushu', submissiveness, is also required. Khushu' is the submission of the limbs and the concentration of the heart, pondering upon and understanding what is being read. So it's pointless to pray if we're not going to actually connect with our heart. Right? So how many people pray 50,000 sunnahs, but they don't focus on the fard? What's the point? Right? So if we just prayed, just the fard, and we did it, we meant what we said. You say Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen from the bottom of your heart. You're saying Maliki Yawmuddin, oh Allah, you're in control of Judgment Day. I'm not. Ya Allah, please help me. And then you really mean it, like Allah, please, guide me. I don't know what I'm doing. You just prayed the fard, but you did it. You're in sujood and you felt it. Right? It's one of my shuyukh tell me, is like, when you go into sujood, thank Allah from the bottom of your heart with your body. Thank Allah from the bottom of your heart for every single thing in your life, with your mind and with your soul. Right? Just thank you, Allah. Right? That's better than doing 50,000 different adhkar in the prayer, outside of the prayer. That's great. Adhkar are beautiful. But how many times do we add quantity without adding quality, right? And so showing off riyah in prayer and all other times is forbidden, and it's a major sin. Inshallah, we'll stop there. And next we'll talk about things that break the prayer. Subhanallah wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.